part might be useful for other people. So, okay, so we are recording. Yeah, so first of all, I want to tell you I highly respect psychology background. Rich Sutton, who is probably the most famous AI person here in town, started in psychology and then went into computer science. And he says that psychology beginning was like so important for everything that he did. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. So you may wonder what this background is. What is going on there? So we're, among other things, merging the fields of transplantation and regenerative medicine. And when you kind of think about how broad the connection between the two would be, then it's kind of interesting. At the moment, it's a thin little thread of active, communication between people in regenerative medicine and people in transplantation. But potentially it's extremely broad. So you can imagine that a lot of the sectors of the connection are completely empty. And the best candidates for the people to fill in those empty sectors are young people, like the young people taking my course. So anyway, that's what this graphic is supposed to depict. Now we're in 2021, and I don't know if you've seen either of these graphics of 2021, but you may not know that's the city of Bangkok, and one of the tallest buildings there is Labua State Tower Hotel. It's mainly an office building, but the very top part of it is a hotel with just this amazing scene of the city. And so both of these are taken from the top floor where you can go out and have a meal of that hotel. And they're supposed to be emblematic of our hopes and dreams for 2021 and beyond, So it's kind of cool to know exactly where that picture came from. Then there's this guy, the Sony Aibo robotic dog. I think one of the few people in Canada that have the new dog. This is a graphic talking about how young people are gonna fix everything that's wrong, that's sort of our secret weapon. Everybody is thinking of other people to call upon, but they have no idea what young people are really capable of, And yeah, so this is the idea of a loft location for work. This is bringing everybody together through social media. This is the movie Fifth Element. And over on the side, you can see a scrawled no future. That's not the case. The future is still going to happen. This is the way my office used to look before COVID. And yeah, a whole bunch of things. This is Edmonton, the Northern Lights. And this is a fantasy that we'd really feel guilty about now, right? Because all the politicians that went to places like this, bad things happened to them. So, anyway, yeah, okay, so I'll get back to this. Yeah, so the important thing to realize about the course, every other course you've taken is about things that exist now. This is a speculative course. We talk about a lot of things that it is very likely will exist, but don't exist yet. So that makes this different from every other course you've ever taken. And also the idea of exponential change, that like the next 10 years is just moving way faster than the previous 10 years. And, we're on this trajectory. Now you mentioned 2045, but actually Ray Kurzweil has now moved it 10 years earlier. He says that the singularity he believes now will be 2035, which is only like 14 years from now. And he has also predicted that mind uploading will be widespread and successful in the 2030s. So that's in the next 19 years. I've pushed back about that and said, I feel that's off by a factor of 10. That I think mind uploading might be a thing in 193 years, but not in 19 years, because no one is psychologically ready for it. So even if it's technically feasible, it's not going to be an option that most people pick 19 years from now. So anyway, that's my story. So at the moment, there are 8 registered students in the course. You would be number 9. Your friend who got you interested would be number 10. So we may end up with 10 registered students, but that's just one component of the course. The course is also open to the general public. So what does that mean? One thing it means is people who fall in love with the course can come back after they finish taking it. And we have a person coming back after 5 years. Can you imagine that? She's so excited about the things that we're intending to do this term that she's going to come back and join us on a regular basis. She'll be there just as often as you are, but she's already taken the course 5 years ago. So that varies a lot. Like for some very normal students, this is just a regular course. They take it and they complete it, and then they're on to other things. But for other students, it's life-changing, and they start doing something in this course, and basically their plan is to keep on doing that forever, you know, and they often come back and help us with future iterations of the course. Then there's the medical student component. So what makes sense from a medical student point of view is to take a 6 or 12-hour elective. So that would be either 4 or 8 teaching sessions. But some of them, I'm very proud of this, they decide to take the whole course, and some of them decide to take the midterm and do a presentation and so on. They become so enamored of the course that they go way beyond what the actual medical student elective requires. And some medical students take it who don't need any more elective credits, but just take it out of interest. And you may think, well, now he's described all the components of the course. There can be nothing more, but you'd be wrong, because January 21st, we're having a special teaching session at 7:30 in the morning. A lot of young people don't do mornings, and so 7:30 a.m. doesn't exist for them. That's okay, because that day we're going to have 2 teaching sessions, separate but equal teaching sessions on the same subject. In the 7:30 session, we will video that, have the video online before the 2 o'clock session, so we kind of bring the 2 together. But in the 7:30 session, there are going to be media people from the Edmonton Journal, sort of following up on the article that they did about the course in 2014 and seeing how the course has sort of evolved.
I read that article.
Over the 7 years, yeah. And then there's the country of Nepal, which is starting a new national university. What do you think it's called? The University of Nepal. So anyway, and the leader of that effort and the sort of brightest and most active young people helping him with that effort are going to join that call to try to figure out how they can use this course and my wisdom or lack thereof, or whatever you want to call it, whatever it is that I do, how that could be useful starting a new university in Nepal. Now, they're about 12 hours different from us, so that it'll be like not too inconvenient time of the evening for them and the morning for us. So I'm also really proud of that, of the way that we are trying to make the course relevant to resource limited settings, because wouldn't it be embarrassing if this course just talked about really expensive stuff only available to the rich in Canada and the US? That would be an icky course, eh? Be so embarrassed to have taken a course like that. Whereas if you take a course about how technology could enable the future, even in resource limited settings, that then is really satisfying. It seems like we're having then discussions that benefit everybody in the world. So that's kind of our angle. So I don't know if you know much about transhumanism. It's really difficult to learn much about that subject because the people in that field have been fighting with each other forever. And so you can't even get a good agreed upon definition of what it is. And one thing that's very striking is it's not configured for young people at all. The discussions are sort of insulting for young people. They have practically zero Instagram presence and so on. The usual things that in a young person's life would sort of make it appealing are all lacking for transhumanism. So for 7 years, or 8 years, since 2013, I've proposed that young people from this course could fix that. That's the missing element. Taryn Stokowski, who is a student who took the course last term, she is dedicated herself to doing that. And so, and you may wonder how that works. So just think about something for a second and see what your opinion is. So the course is configured in the following way, that there's a midterm that's worth 20% of your grade. There's a final presentation that's worth 30%, a paper that's worth 40%, and then there's class participation. And we have a kind of mentor system where you can pick anyone who's ever taught in the course, including students your own age, because we do have very young people teaching in the course, and have them help you plan your final presentation and so on. But in the world before Taryn Stokowski, every student who picked me as their mentor, if I suggested something to them about how they should configure their final presentation or paper, they did what I said, because I'm in charge of the course and I'm suggesting the change, and well, I guess I better make that change. So Taryn rejected every suggestion I had. She didn't make any of the changes that I suggested. She absolutely aced the course. She had like the top grades in all the various components of the course, while rejecting every suggestion that I have made. So isn't that cool to think that that's possible, that there's that kind of freedom in the world? We all wake up in the morning with these sort of mundane assumptions about how the world works, and what is and isn't possible. And every time something like that happens, suggests that there's a whole different area of freedom you never considered. Like your prof could make suggestions and you could say, I don't think so. I'm not going to do any of those things. And you still get the top grade in the course, huh? Isn't that amazing? I think it is. It's something that never occurred to me. And like, that's one of the other things you may find sort of hard to figure out exactly who's influencing me, but you'll have various candidates So like there is Rebecca, who she is a medical student who shares this office with me. So you'd say, well, gee, she's actually physically there some parts of the week. Maybe she has an influence. So what distinguished her is that I had this description of the medical student elective, and somehow at the time I wrote it, the people in charge of medical student electives lost the ability to edit the website. So my description was full of errors and things that just didn't make sense and so on. But she somehow is like reading the Rosetta Stone. She sensed there was something important in there and she could benefit from it. So she came to see me. No, nobody approached me about taking that medical student elective for years. And so then we found that we could now edit it and so on. So that's one person who's obviously influenced me. Then there's pathology resident Cheng Yin Wang at the University of Montreal. So when she was a medical student, she came here for her CARMS interviews to figure out where she wants to do her residency training. And this was one of the candidate places. So she came here for that. But she developed an alternative plan for what she was going to do when she was here. She became fascinated by me and the LABMP classification and the very heterogeneous and strange and weird things that I have done. And she decided to track me down and meet me, but she didn't approach me or anything about it. She just showed up. So like on a very busy day, this young woman appears at my door and she could possibly talk to me. So we carved out 45 minutes and then that didn't quite finish everything she wanted to say. So she wrote me a note and stuff. And since that day, February 6, 2020, we have been collaborating on all sorts of exciting projects, basically since the time of that 45-minute presentation. I think she never had any intention of coming here for residency training, but she really liked the idea of tracking me down, and that was a good excuse. And yeah, so that's pretty amazing. As another medical student who hand delivered to my home this microscope lapel pin, you can see. So the global health group here, the medical students interested in global health, they do what's called mix and mingle. Doesn't that sound cool? Where they get together medical students interested in global health and faculty members like me who've done stuff in global health. Like I created a new medical school. I helped create a new medical school devoted to rural health in Nepal and did other things like that. And the structure of the evening, see how challenging this sounds to you. So the students, there's a lecture, and I think there's even food, or there used to be food. There probably isn't food now because it's all virtual. It have to be virtual food. But anyway, there's an hour where they get to talk to 6 different faculty members for 10 minutes each. I don't know how practical that sounds to you, but like a lot of the faculty members feel that, this is practically worthless to meet them because it takes them 8.5 minutes to explain who they are, and that only leaves like a minute and a half and stuff like that. Whereas I somehow, Dr. Soundbite, I can figure out how to put together a 10-minute presentation that'd be satisfying for an audience where basically no loose ends, nothing missing, and they leave totally satisfied, even though it was only 10 minutes. So anyway, that's why they decided to bring that microscope lapel pin to me, because I'm like the only one who seemed to actually give a totally satisfying session. And my messages are very empowering for young people. Never reject the idea of living a life without precedent. In other words, taking a path no one else has ever taken. That's really the easiest way, because if you live a life with precedent, then there are things that you can be judged against, like, are you moving fast enough? Are you performing high enough and stuff? Whereas if you're doing something no one's ever done, there's no one to compare you to, right? So it's really easy. You're the best person doing that because you're the only person doing that, right? And then don't give up the things that make you interesting, because it's a complete fable, a fiction, that medical school is so difficult that you just have to give up everything else, just concentrate on medicine. And later on, when people are deciding who to pick as leaders, the people who have other interests, other talents, who are still interesting to talk to after 10 p.m. at night, when there's talk about work stops the parties and have to talk about other things, and half the people there don't know anything else except work, right? And so they sort of become quiet at that point, right? So having a life beyond medicine not only makes life more fun, but actually makes you more successful within medicine. So those are two of the ideas that I presented. The third may amuse you. I don't know if you know any men like this, but for decades, or maybe 100 years, men have felt something missing in their lives, because in previous eras, they could go to sea and fight pirates, and they could go on crusades and, save the world from a religious point of view and so on. And now none of those exciting options are there for men anymore. They go directly from their mothers to their wives with no intervening pirates or crusades or anything. Mm-hmm. And so the problem with that, from a global health point of view, when there's a disaster in a foreign country, all these guys that are missing this piece of their life where they need the fighting pirates and crusade stuff. When there's an earthquake somewhere, for instance, and a lot of people being crushed by fallen masonry and crush injury-induced kidney failure, they decide to go there and save those people, even though no one has asked for outside help, or even though they've said they don't need outside help, everything's fine, they still go there. And then they wonder, why are they not appreciated? There are these first world doctors going to this third world place with an earthquake. And it's like people are ignoring them and looking like they're a kind of irritant in the system and shouldn't be there. And they just don't realize how special people from the first world are, and they should always be appreciated, even in the midst of a major disaster. So yeah, so that's the other thing that I talk about. I'm not sure that in the COVID pandemic that men's aspirations for that kind of experience are quite as strong as they used to be. But anyway, it certainly has been a motivator for inappropriate global health experiences, where people do things that they feel they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart, but really they're doing it to sort of complete the story of their life, right? So there's enough manly excitement in it. Yeah. So those are like the stories that I tell in my 10 minutes. Okay. So what questions do you have about the course?
other than the main topics that were mentioned in your syllabus, what else is new or like that we're discussing? Are we going to be discussing the COVID?
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. So we used to have a lecture on anthrax, and the guy who, so anthrax, as you may know, is like an infectious
Biological.
disease that's all caught up with international politics, right? The September 11th, 2001, with the attack on the World Trade Center, there were letters mailed to prominent people containing anthrax powder and all this kind of thing, right? So we're going to replace the lecture about that with a lecture about COVID, and we may have more than one lecture about COVID. If you look at the videos on my YouTube channel, you'll see that the course changes every term. And if you think about it, the course has to change every term. A course about the future isn't valid if it's always the same, because obviously the way the future is looking is constantly changing depending upon, you know, events of the present. And yeah, so anyway, so every term we will be talking about things that we have never talked about before. I like surprises, so I assume the students do too, but I don't know. Probably not uniformly so. Probably some students who take the course would like more predictability, or would like to be able to completely understand every subject that I describe in the lecture outline. But I think that it's good to always have some things there that for many people are completely mysterious. They have no idea what that is. Like, what is quantum supremacy? You know, or yeah, so things like that.
Sorry,
yeah.
I was just thinking about when you just said that. I watched the last 8 minutes of the TED Talk you left in your syllabus. And I remember the 5 ways singularity can happen. And the 5th one was the transcendence and saturating the space-time continuum with human consciousness.
Right.
I still can't wrap my head around that. Like, I genuinely can't. But yeah, I feel like that's pretty much something I won't be able to understand, but I'll try.
Yeah, well, so another related concept then is computronium, the idea of turning everything in the universe into things related to computing or, you know, information. But there's certainly some ways the singularity could happen that are easy to understand. One is simply that the internet wakes up. I mean, you're used to just going to a passive computer and the computer does what you tell it to, right? What if you woke up one morning and there was a message from you, for you, from your computer that maybe made it very clear that the computer is now in charge and has a lot of, you know, advice for you and kind of analyzing the way you've been spending your time, and can think that you could really do much better, you know, if you spent your time the way the computer suggests. And that it is clear that human beings are not very good at managing the world, and a superior intelligence is needed. And then you can imagine that when that happens, you look out the window and everything's greener. The oxygen tension in the world is higher than it's ever been. The oceans recede, you know, global warming stops, and human conflict. Like if 2 men are in the same space and start attacking each other, some unseen force comes and says, now, boys, and just moves them apart so they can't fight. So you can imagine that this internet coming alive could fix everything because it would be smarter than we are, and it might be a much better world. It would even understand human happiness better than we do. I mean, we think human happiness is important, but it's not something we understand very well. You know, sometimes good things happen to you and you feel depressed. How does that work? You know, it's like, what's going on? You know, and whereas probably the internet waking up would even be able to manage human lives so humans would be uniformly happier, you know, or uniformly more productive and happier, you know, whatever mix you think would be ideal, that would be possible. And there's a counterbalancing, you know, apocalyptic side, right?
Yeah.
You can imagine that this super intelligence is capable of creating a much scarier world than you ever considered, right? Not only a much better world, but also a much worse world.
Yeah. I do have my reservations about that because, okay, what if some unseen force tells you that this is objectively better for you and the person in the, you know, the same room? Okay, but what about free will then? What happens there? Does it become like a whole, I don't know, like what your parent tells you to do when you're a kid?
Sure, but we probably don't have free will now, right? I mean, it's unclear exactly what we have, but like the conversation you and I are having, we think that every word, every sound bite, we're in charge, right? And like what I'm saying is completely what I wish to say, and the only reason those phonemes are coming out of my mouth is that's what I want to say. And similarly with you, but actually there's a lot of evidence that if you look at, you know, electrical signals in the brain and stuff, like if you ask me to make a decision, there's some evidence that I make the decision before I start talking about it and so on. You know, like I'm sure you know more about this than I do, but I mean, you know, psychology, there is one aspect of it of sort of studying that. Are we really making decisions? How much of it is predetermined? How much is unconscious? And what about the collective unconscious? So that interests me a lot. You may know there's kind of an association between Leonard Cohen and me, poet, singer, songwriter Leonard Cohen. So Leonard Cohen said, if I knew where the good songs come from, I would go there more often. And this is like a lot of other statements from really famous people that suggest there are things you shouldn't even try to do. Like Leonard Cohen is saying, if I knew where the good songs come from, I would go there more often. So that seems to suggest you shouldn't even try to figure that out. But actually, isn't it easy to figure that out if you can sort of tap into this collective unconscious of human society that is changing? You know, what makes a song good in a sense that most people in society like it, it has something to do with what that collective unconscious is, right? And it is possible to figure that out or just look at what the changes are. You know, what songs were popular in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, what's happening with shifts in human interest in music. And you can make a good guess at what is the characteristic of this collective unconscious. So there are many other things like that. actually. If you take Yuval Noah Harari, the best known tech writer at the moment. And one of the things that I'm quite proud of is we've pushed back at some of his blanket statements, and he doesn't make them anymore. What he used to say every time he began a conversation with a new person or group, he would say, well, I'm just a historian. I'm just pointing out the dangers. I have no responsibility to provide solutions. And the other thing that he said, which really set me off, is that in the future, human culture will be wrecked for the very simple reason that every plot line of every movie and TV show and novel and everything, they all depend upon human decision making. And in the future, only idiots will make their own decisions. So it'll be clear that machines are uniformly better at making decisions than you are, even who to marry or what to do with your life or whatever. Maybe even the more consequential. The question is, the more important it is to do what the machine says rather than try to figure it out yourself. So that will wreck human culture. To me, that makes absolutely no sense at all, because humans are adaptable and they will react to a new circumstance. If the intelligence exists to make such excellent high-level decisions, then the intelligence exists to run multiple lives at once, to have multiple instances of yourself. And you find lots of videos with me talking about this. And you know, the Upload TV show has like service people, butlers and waiters and stuff. They come out of the door where the kitchen is, and then they divide into multiple people and that sort of thing. But I think it could go way beyond that. So that wouldn't be human culture being wrecked. That would be human culture being 5, 6, 1,000 times better than it is now, because you would have no unfulfilled desires, right? Anything you wanted to do, to be, to experience, you could all not only do it, but do it simultaneously with the other things, right? These multiple instances of self. The reason we can't do now is we would get mixed up. We're not smart enough to keep several lives going. If you think about multi-boxing in video games, that's a kind of dumb thing where there's not a lot of intellect in these individual characters, but still it's maybe similar to what I'm talking about. And when you met a friend on the street and started sharing things about your life, you'd always have only successes to talk about, because why would there ever be any failures? You would never reject something because there's something else at the same time. So FOMO is gone. Fear of missing out is completely gone from your life. Yeah. So that's a much better culture than the culture we have now, rather than culture being wrecked. Yeah. So Yuval Noah Harari has accepted both of those ideas of mine, and so he no longer introduces himself like that. And when asked about human culture in the future, he says it's a work in progress, but humans are adaptable. Okay, that's the right answer. Yeah. So anyway, it's important to sort of maintain your own independent decision-making ability and not have the statements of famous people sort of cut you off from even looking into things. Like, said, I'm never going to look at where the good songs come from because listen to what Leonard Cohen said. Or I'm not going to try to improve human culture because listen to what Yuval Noah Harari said. It's just I shouldn't mess with it. That's simply not true. There's a lot more opportunities to do really exciting things, even things where there's a very memorable blanket statement that some famous person has made that doesn't mean that you can't make substantial changes in that area and improve human life experience thereby. So the many more, endorphin producing fun things to do in the world than it would seem, and fewer limits. Yeah. So anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Do you have other questions?
None so far.
So usually the younger the person is, the more they're interested in grades. That's kind of amusing to me because before we started the course, we did these focus groups, but an undergraduate focus group and a graduate focus group. And the undergraduates just wanted to talk about grades. How are we going to grade? We're going to curve, blah, 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 blah. And the graduate students only wanted to talk about big picture things. How can we use this course to change the world? Can we make sure it's always open to the general public and that there's continuity and that lessons learned in one term are not lost so no one else, okay, and all this kind of grand planning. And it's kind of amusing because after all, undergraduates become graduate students, right? So it sort of reinforces your faith in human protoplasm that can actually happen. These people totally preoccupied by grades become people totally preoccupied with changing the world. Anyway, so the grades tend to be high, and it's kind of amusing sometimes. Like all the students get some brand of A, and the unhappy students are the students who get plain A because they wanted an A plus. They're really upset, but the data to show that they didn't do as well as the people who got an A plus is there, and the data to show that A is a very good grade at the U of A is also there. You can't be unhappy when you get an A. I mean, you can be unhappy for a few minutes, but it should not, persist very long. What about students who just coast, who come in and don't do anything? That's really hard. Not because of me, but because of you and the other students. So the other students make you like they're so eager, like excited, enthusiastic about the subject matter, that if you come in with the secret plan of doing nothing, you won't respect yourself when you look in the mirror anymore. You'll think, oh, there's something terribly wrong with me. So you'd end up doing a little bit of work anyway. So if you plan to do nothing, you get like a C or a C plus because accidentally you would learn enough to pass the course. And we haven't had any students like that for a long time. But what has fascinated me, for a long time, I was aware of the high performing student, the student superstar, and the Peter Lougheed Leadership Center, those people. Many of them took the course or ended up teaching in the course, or both took the course first and then ended up teaching in it. But then I became aware of another group of students, which I think are kind of equally interesting. These are students who've never gotten A's. They have no intention of getting an A. And if they got an A, they would be maybe upset because it's not their standard. Their standard is getting B's, but taking really cool courses and trying to figure out what is the psychologically the best experience as a U of A student, and concluding that taking this course is like one of the things that you don't want to miss here. And so the first time we had such a student, I was really sort of hesitant about what was going to happen, because they got the lowest grade, which was like a B or a B minus. But then when I realized they were perfectly happy with that, that's what they always get, you know, it's like, that's normal life. And you may wonder about the students who work for the course. Like you'll notice in the bios, all the students listed there were like the students who did the best in the term that they took the course. You may think, well, yeah, that's the only kind of student that would like come back and keep. That's absolutely wrong. We have had very dedicated students who got the bottom grade in the course, the absolutely lowest grade in the term that they took it, still love the experience and want to come back and volunteer. And yeah, anyway, if you think of the most loathsome experience in Canada, what about being stuck at the Pearson Airport all night? There's no place to sleep except the top rubberized surface of those, electric carts, right? And those carts are only available for like 3 hours because they're in use every other time. But you can maybe sleep on the top of those carts from like midnight to 3 a.m. and that's it. There's a student who shared that experience with me, a male student. I'm thinking, how could anybody enjoy this? And so we were stuck. There was terrible weather, and actually all the surrounding hotels near the airport were full. And if you traveled long enough to find a hotel that had a room, you would just need to turn around and come back because your flight was leaving and stuff. So anyway, yeah. But he not only enjoyed the course and got the lowest grade, but he enjoyed that night. And they talked about unusual and memorable night it was. I guess that's true. Yeah. But anyway, so those are some of the stories about reaction to the course. So when you, like the first day of the course, when you look at the other people on Zoom, one of the fun things when I talk about surprises is you can't really tell which of those people are going to take the midterm. Like that the first time that somebody who was not registered for the course said they wanted to take the midterm, I was like, wow, I had no idea. But they just want to kind of measure themselves against the other registered students. And the first time one of the students who was not registered for the course, where there would be no permanent record of them taking the course at all, wanted to do a final presentation or paper, I was also very surprised, but that happens. And so I think you can't predict which of the people you're meeting there you will enjoy the interaction with the most or find most memorable. But I think that's the most fun of it, really. It's not only surprising the information that those of us teaching the course are giving you, but it's surprising kind of constantly changing algorithm of how the course really works. It's like, well, who takes this course and what are their motivations, and what happens after the course, and all those kind of, I would say that's constantly changing. And people who know I like surprises come to me with like new suggestions that no student has ever suggested in the 10-year history of the course. And, I like that. So, but they don't have to do that. They can do well without, surprising me. there's no like trick answer of like, unless you have a certain format of your paper, you won't do very well, or unless, you know, a certain weird component of your no, there isn't anything like that. You can do a paper and a presentation and your whole performance can be completely different from what any other student in the course has ever done. And that can be an outstanding performance where you get excellent grades and you enjoy it and I enjoy it and everybody enjoys your presence there. Yeah. Sometimes the final presentation is literally life-changing. Isha Harian, I think about 2014, gave a presentation and we put it on YouTube. And the next day, a very famous guy, famous tech guy who's also an actor with his own TV show, married to an actress and all, you know, calls her up and offers her a job as like the chief of social media for a new startup in New York City. It happened to fit in perfectly with, I mean, she hadn't been planning to go there, but she had the freedom to do that, and she's been there ever since. So I don't guarantee that, right? I'm saying it's going to happen, but it could happen. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, there are potential surprises out there. So any other things you wanted to ask about?
Honestly, well, I think I would like to bring a fresh perspective in. I grew up and was raised in Egypt, a predominantly third world country.
Right.
And I've seen a lot of the damage that's been done there. And so my interest in global health is pretty big. I actually had a few thoughts when you were talking about the unwanted global health. And I actually don't think it's because of, like, they think they're doing something and, you know, it's great for them, like the people helping, but it's not so much for the people receiving the help.
Yes, yes.
It has something to do, honestly, with the fact that in a lot of these countries, the political situation is sort of caused by first world countries, or at least not helped by the first world countries,
Sure.
the majority. So when a select few actually do decide to help, the people are pretty weary, if that's maybe the right term.
Yes. Yeah.
The help that should be given is really dependent on the type of people and the location of the help. Right. Some people are honestly perfectly content with their current lives, but where help could be provided would be, for example, for their children.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I would really love to discuss global health and ethics and the political situation, right, and how we could help.
No, we talk about ethics pretty much every single teaching session. And a lot of the people who are, a lot of the young people who are teaching in the course now and who took the course recently are also people with very strong ethics interests. And I just wanted to point out in my own personal history, a lot of sort of accidents of timing. So I had an academic interest in sudden kidney failure of the kidney. And I decided to create a new organization for it. And this was in 1988 at exactly the same time as a big earthquake in Yerevan, Armenia. And so I originally was just going to do a completely academic thing. It had nothing to do with patient care or providing medical care. It was just, you know, academic study of what causes the kidney to fail. But right during the meeting, there were all these reports of the crush injury induced kidney failure. And so we decided to incorporate that. But what was interesting is the second disaster, worse than the first. People reacting to the news of the earthquake and going to Yerevan and clogging up the airport and the highways and everything with inappropriate and sometimes very embarrassing kinds of help, like pharmaceutical companies as a tax write-off, sending vitamins and birth control pills in huge numbers to the site of the earthquake. You don't need vitamins and birth control pills, particularly all labeled in, you know, English, where people couldn't even read what the labels were. Mm. And there were planes that crashed that were planes involved in that kind of inappropriate help. So, I mean, that's an important lesson to realize that the man-made second disaster inappropriately reacting to the natural disaster can be worse than the original natural disaster, or make it much worse than it would otherwise have been. Then I think the other thing that's kind of interesting is thinking about your own analysis of situations and how the knee-jerk reaction to the information is just often incorrect. If you look at my history in Nepal, I've been going there for 23 years. And so you're a student, you might be interested in the following question. Well, how many students have I taught in Nepal? 0. And why is that? Well, because I've done a lot of teaching of faculty and sort of people my own age and leaders and people who were teaching students, but not the students themselves, because the main students we were interacting with were medical students, let's say in their late 20s, early 30s, who had already had a certain kind of education up to that point, in which the technological singularity and the things that I'm an expert in really just don't make any sense at that point. You know, it'd like be a terrible distraction and they wouldn't believe it anyhow. You know, that can't be a thing. Yeah. So anyway, I never tried. So now though, this new University of Nepal that I'm telling you about is, you know, undergraduate students. So those people are young enough that I can teach them what the world of the future is really going to be like, and they have time to sort of appropriately react to that. They're not yet at the stage where this rigidity set in, and you know, you don't want anything that kind of conflicts with the reality that you know, right? But that's one of the amusing things. If I become one of the major influences on how this new university functions, it is fascinating to think about the fact that I've been going to Nepal for so long, but have never taught students of the age that will be going to that university in Nepal. I mean, I've certainly taught them here, and you may wonder how young the students have been. So like, I kind of surround myself with young people in the workplace. It's not as close now in the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, the people around me were the entire day between the ages of 15 and 33. Those were the only people I could talk to. There was no other option. And it worked just fine. And it kept me young. I think was good for both parties, all parties. And it's so different from the feeling that a lot of older people have that young people are a complete waste of time to talk to. They haven't been alive on Earth long enough to know anything worth talking about, really, and have no deep insights. You know, every moment spent talking to a young person is like doubly wasted, because not only are you going to get nothing out of the conversation, but you could have been doing something so much better. Yeah, whereas my experience has been exactly the opposite. And it's kind of fun if you're surrounded by kind of high performing young people, then if you become interested in like young people's culture, you'll know about the popular songs for young people before the young people in the room do, because they would never listen to like those generic radio stations. So, you know, yeah, so it was kind of fun for me to see if I could routinely always know about the hot new songs before they did, and I usually did. So anyway, yeah. So I don't want to go on and on any longer than is necessary here. I guess the question now is, having met me, do you still want to take the course?
1000%, even more so, honestly.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I've been to Egypt. I've had a lot of sort of thought-provoking experiences there. The wife of one of the most prominent people in kidney medicine wanted me to go inside a pyramid with very low, doorway and that sort
Very
of
stuffy
thing
in there.
with her, because her husband was afraid to do that. And I'm so glad I didn't do that for all sorts of reasons. You know, it's not just there's one danger, there are so many dangers in that situation. And yeah, but I traveled with very, very famous kidney physicians. And the things they revealed in Egypt were like, I got like such insights into what really made them tick that I think I wouldn't have gotten any other way. So it was kind of cool from that point of view. Different reasons to enjoy Egypt. And Lorraine Rackison, the person I started the BAMF classification with, she and I went to Egypt together, and she's taking a camel ride, and the camel driver, whatever, as he was lifting her up on the camel, put his hand on her inner thigh, kind of thing. So I was shocked, upset about that. She just said, "Well, that's a really good job this guy has." I guess that's one way to look at it. Yeah. Anyway, so many memorable things about Egypt, and we also spent a lot of time in Israel and on the no man's land between Israel and Syria. We drove along that road in between the two security fences. Had a picnic in there. I now think it was a really stupid thing to do, but anyway, we did it. Yeah. So, and I guess so Lorraine, you would eventually find out that on December 31st of last year, 2020, we published a paper celebrating the 40 years that she's worked with me. Actually, it's been 41. So yeah, and her conclusion about me is I like to give people experiences. I'm very good at it, and they enjoy it. I enjoy it. There's like no inhibitory factor. So that's her take on things. Yeah. So anyway, do you have any other questions? Because you probably had other things to do today. You had no idea that.
No, I definitely allotted time to have a full-on conversation. I'm very glad this happened.
Good, good, good. Okay, well then I will see you. I believe you've already given me your student number. Yeah, so you'll be registered in the course probably later today, and so I will see you on Tuesday the 12th at 2 p.m. We very rapidly get into this transhumanism stuff. That's on the 14th, and then on the 17th, Sunday the 17th, there's a Humanity Plus meeting that Taryn and I and several other people, and anyone who wants to, is going to kind of try to assess how our activities should relate to that organization. And then the following Tuesday, Taryn speaks again, and then really the best known and most successful futurist in the world is the guy teaching on the 21st. Yeah, so anyway, that's kind of how the course starts. And then we go back to the space part and the Shauna Panja part, and that is, very much a high point also. So anyway, it'll be a very exciting term. And I'm happy to have you joining us, and I'm looking forward to meeting your friend tomorrow at 10. Anyway, it is fun to have two people or more who know each other in the course. If you look at the videos from 2013, there's a certain ambiance there of what a group of students who all knew each other before and then decided to take the course, what that can be like. And it is really fun. So yeah, I think you'll enjoy that very much. Okay, well, I think that's it. And thanks for speaking with me. And I'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, honestly.
Okay, great. Bye-bye now. Yeah.